TNKR Media.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Salt Lake Podcast. I'm David McMillan. Leslie will join us in a little bit. A very special guest today for a deep dive on oysters. And before we get into it, we'd like to pay homage to a legend in Canadian oysters, a legend in the worldwide oyster world, Rodney Clark. First, I'd like to welcome Patrick McMurray. Patrick is an oyster sommelier. He's the Guinness World Record holder for fastest shucker. He's also the author of the Oyster Companion and co-founder of the Oyster Master Guild. Follow him on Instagram at shuckerpatty. Let's take a moment to talk about a legend who passed away this week, Rodney Clark of Rodney's Oyster House, which opened in Toronto in 1987, the original oysterman of Toronto, even Canada, who helped Canadians discover the delicacy he grew up with in PEI. He passed away on November 6th at the age of 75 years old.
Mr. Clark was quite a character and introduced all of the contemporary Canadian oyster people into this world. Whether they worked with them for a couple of weeks to a couple of months to a couple of years. I spent 8.5 years working at Rodney's Oyster House. It was one of my formative years when it comes to definitely oysters and his style of service and having a good time with food. He was an absolute legend. So we're missing him right now.
How many oyster bars do you think across Canada basically are helmed by Rodney's Oyster House people?
It's the lineage, it's the family tree. We always used to joke that, the family tree like a telephone pole down maritime ways, but he's got many branches and they spun off, whether they learned directly or indirectly. I mean, most every oyster bar establishment in Canada has had some form of person working there that had a spin-off from Rodney's Oyster House. Directly, probably about six or seven at least.
Yeah, for sure. There's guys like you, John Bill, who passed away, Petkoff. Who's that oyster shucker out west I always see online?
Well, there's Rodney's Oyster House, Vancouver, but there's also Smitty's, which
right,
is
of course.
That's Stafford Lumley. Mr. Knockin from Montreal as well, spent some time, I believe.
Sure.
And then, Adam Oysterboy as well. And the crew there, some of the crew come and go out of Rodney's Oyster House. Tide and Vine down in Niagara.
How is Rodney regarded on Prince Edward Island?
He is, he moved back there over the years. He wanted to move back and live where he grew up, type of thing, which is what he accomplished in the final years. And in the oyster world, it is he's well respected when it comes down to what he's brought to the province of the island itself, bringing more people into learning about the oyster and wanting to go there. So he's well respected in the industry of knowing the oysters and enjoying it, and showcasing what the oyster can bring to the people.
That's amazing. Leslie's going to join us in a few, but I'd asked you to share a little poem, a little thought on MFK Fisher.
MFK Fisher, my goodness, this is the other thing that Mr. Clark did for us as shuckers. It's really introduced us to the world of the literature of oysters, which is huge, long, and deep, like very, very, Pliny the Elder wrote about oysters in Roman eras. But one of the greatest, of course, in food writing is MFK Fisher. And I always pull this quote out when I have to throw someone a bit of an oyster and a shucky quote type of thing, but coming from the great MFK Fisher. And I'll read it out here for a second. He stands there, opening shells with a skill undreamed of by an ordinary man, and yet always with a few cuts showing on his fingers, putting the open oysters carefully, automatically on a slab of ice in front of him.
Beauty.
1941.
Yeah, beautiful. I love Googling often old master paintings of oysters. I love a good oyster painting.
Mm.
The Dutch, hammered out some
Ah,
beautiful paintings as well as some Spaniards have as well. Just love a good, wooden table with a candle, a loaf of bread, and a beaten down lead plate or zinc plate,
yeah,
with
yeah.
some oysters, and maybe like there's a cat in the background, looking over the edge of the table through the candlelight at the oysters. It's always, they're just great objects. I own a few. And
It's amazing.
I've tried my hand at painting oysters, just because I thought it was neat. What was always cool at Rodney's is like the art of just the pine slats. Some oysters come in pine boxes, and
Mm.
they would take the pine box slats apart and they would write the oyster on it, right, with a little drawing and provenance. And I believe like, different colored Sharpie markers, and those would be like retired to the ceiling somehow when
Absolutely.
yeah, and used again, when you get that oyster back, right? So that's a beautiful object to have. I think I have a couple that I've kind of lifted,
Got to
but
use the boxes for sure. And that came from Mr. Clark as well. He actually had a degree in arts out of Maine. He's like a general, artist when it comes down to things, not just in his thinking of towards oysters, but also creating artwork and drawings.
that's
He always did
amazing.
the gift certificates. They still don't do gift certificates. They do shelves. That ended up being one of my jobs when I was there. Is I got good at copying people's logos. So he would be drawing it with the four colored Sharpie markers, fine tips, and then I started doing it pretty well. And he goes, "Okay, you can do this." And I did one. I did the Campbell's soup. Wanted to do it, so I did a Warhol moment with the Campbell's soup in a series of oyster shells, and they go out there. The brilliant thing is when you do a really good job of the artwork. And he said this one. He goes, "Yeah, they'll bring the gift certificate back about 75% of the time. And the rest of it, the money is sitting out there in the wall because they put it up on the air as a piece of art. It was great."
Beautiful. All right. So at the end of the podcast, Patrick is going to read a poem. It's a 4-minute poem. It's a tribute to Rodney Clark. And stay tuned for that. It'll be at the end of the podcast. Let's get this going with Leslie, and she'll join us right
Great.
now.
Hi, Patrick. I've never met you before.
Nice to see you.
I see a lot of oyster paraphernalia in your
Oh
background.
yeah, it's this is the room. This is
The man cave. It's the oyster
this is
cave.
oyster cave, shellfish cave, whatever you want to call it. That's
Wow.
a lot of stuff from 2 restaurants and 30 plus years of oystering type of thing. So it's all stuck here in the basement.
So you're in Toronto right now.
Yeah, I'm in Ajax, little town just
Okay.
to the east of Toronto proper.
Patrick is a teacher, an oyster educator, and a Guinness Book of World Records holder. Let's talk about that quickly. I saw that on your bio.
Yeah.
So today's show's about oysters. We're going to talk all things oysters, East Coast, West Coast, Northern, South. We're going to get into European oysters a little bit. We're going to get into a professional oyster shucking, so on. And so like, I'd love to know about this Guinness World Book of Records thing.
It's a funny thing. It wasn't something I intended to do. When I won the World Championships, that's a judged event in Galway, Ireland. For the past now, it's like almost 70 years type of thing.
How many times have you won that?
I've won it once. I'm the only Canadian ever to win it. There's only been three North American folks who've ever won it. 2 out of the States, 1 out of Canada. I was actually host this year. They actually brought me back to be the MC and the host for the actual event this year, which was kind of a great honor.
So for the people who don't know, the Galway Oyster Shucking Championship is the Olympics of oyster shucking. This is
that's the ultimate goal. You have to win your national championships to make it to Galway. And it's been thought of for a long time ago, like 60, 70 years ago. And it's something that we all strive for. The Guinness Book is a different thing altogether, but it's the one ticket to flights everywhere because more people drop their jaw when you say, "I won the World Championships of Oysters." Oh, that's nice. And the Guinness Book. What? They're like, what do you mean Guinness Book? So I do have the Guinness Book of World Records. And at the moment, it's 39 oysters in a minute. I also have 1,114 in an hour. But the 39 was called out by Gordon Ramsay. This is the level of which you get people to call you on, which is kind of an interesting thing. And I didn't notice this until I won the World Championships in 2002. I was invited to go on a TV show with Christine Cushing. And she said, come and do something, show us your oystery skills. I go, it's great, but watching me shuck oysters for 2.5 minutes on 30 oysters is like watching paint dry. But there's this little thing called Guinness, and it was set for 27 oysters in a minute at that point. She goes, that's perfect, let's try that. So I brought in 40 oysters. I laid them on like a folding table in the set, and they're plastic top. It was slippery as heck. It was crazy. And they go 3, 2, 1, go. She's got goggles on. She's banging stuff with to get me going right on the TV. I apparently knocked out 33 oysters. They wrapped up the tape, sent it to Guinness, and a year later they gave us the award. So, and she's on it too. It's kind of fun. I got it up there. It's Patrick did 33 oysters in a minute on the Christine Cushing show, and that's where it opens the doors. It's kind of funny because if you want to be on TV, a minute is perfect. Now it's down to 30 seconds. No one has any time for a whole minute. So, but it gets you that ticket around the world. It's literally got me to Beijing about 3 times just because to go on a show for Guinness Book. And then of course, Gordon Ramsay calls out.
That's amazing. When you shuck oysters at Galway, you're shucking a different oyster. You're shucking the European flat oyster?
It is, yes.
And how difficult is that from, let's say, you shuck basically the majority of the oysters you shuck are Malpecs, I would presume, like Canadian oysters.
Classic East Coast, North American East Coast oyster. They tend to be in the level of difficulty. They're level 1. And there's different levels of shuckability, and East Coast oysters tend to be that side of easy. And it goes up from there. With the European flats are still one of the most difficult technically oysters to open and open well. Some of the hinges this year, the hinge was very micro thin, very hard to see and navigate your knife tip into it. And then you've got this double wide adductor muscle on it as well. So there's a lot of technical difficulties to it. So I rank it to like an 8 or a 9, and that's level of 10 as difficulty to do.
Right. When you shuck that oyster too, that European oyster, do you use your traditional the Patrick McMurray knife? Right. That thing there.
I created this thing a long time ago as a singular blade that opens all the oysters because it's starfish. We did 5 species and then multiple varieties. I had 20 oysters once from 5 different countries in 2007. Such a crazy time, but I don't have time to change my blade. And I know there's a lot of shuckers that will go, well, on this knife, this oyster, I use this one. On that one, I use this one. And I don't have time to change my blade. I got to take these oyster plates out. So it's just like, so I created the one thing all the time. So it's just, funky handle, but it helps lever open the oyster. And I find it works.
Where is that available, Patrick, online? Is there somewhere people can see that knife? Because Patrick's knife is a special knife. I remember seeing it back in the day. I think you gave me one.
Yeah.
So it's like basically an epoxy molded handle, which is a little bit bent like a banana. And then it doesn't have the traditional straight Malpec blade. It's got a little bit of a divot at the end of the blade, which is really good to cut the abductor muscle. So where can people see that knife online or purchase one? You have a website?
Yeah, it's on Amazon, actually. Everything is under the brand Shucker Patty. That's sort of my handle I created when Twitter was around. This is pre-Instagram. I created this name Shucker Patty because it works better than Patrick McMurray. And then about a month later, Swissmar, the president of Swissmar, was eating at Starfish and saw my oyster knife and heard the story. He says, let's put that into production. I was like, sure, why not? So Swissmar is a Swiss-Canadian kitchen tool brand that actually my knife just got moved to Zillis. So it's going to a bigger brand on a global scale type of thing. And this is in the next couple of months. So it's still going to be on Amazon. It's still going to be available globally in that sense as well. But yeah, it's they call it a pistol grip or something shape. It's ergodynamically thought of. I have a degree in kinesiology, strangely enough. So coming out of University of Toronto for kinesiology and starting to work in the restaurant at the oyster level, most oyster knives were too small for my hand. It didn't fit. So I created this one that fit my hand like an injection molded ski boot does skis. You get better torque on it. So that's just the thought and theory behind the whole thing. And it kind of came through and is now in production. And there's lots of different things going on with it.
That's amazing.
How did you become this oyster obsessive? I don't want to say maniac,
geek.
But
yeah, maniac, geek.
Did you have a revelation when you were young? You ate an oyster.
Yes, my parents kept me in the basement.
That's it.
Shucking oysters, and I said, "This is not a bad gig." No, I really, in the end, I wanted to be a teacher. my parents are teachers. So I said, that's a good gig. You get to work with the students, and then you have these 2 months off. You travel all over the place. My parents did more traveling than throwing the kids, me and my brother, into camp. Most Canadian kids go to camp. I had to travel to Europe and France and England and Ireland and stuff. Oh, woe is me, says my wife. And we tried food. And this is where I really got this great interest and passion for food. And my first job was a butcher's apprentice, just sweeping up, scraping the block, doing the sawdust on the floor, learning about cuts.
How old were you? How
14.
old were you? 14.
14. Okay. And then they retired when I was 16. I still have the block today. That's actually a Brad Long's joint right now, which is kind of fun. But I knew that the food was sort of neat. And I got a job as a busboy, and thought then at 16, I thought this food thing would be kind of cool. And I just worked my way through and didn't start doing oysters until end of university. And I got into Rodney's Oyster House, and I worked there for a couple of years and built my own restaurant at Starfish in 2001. But figuring out about year 3, so it wasn't until like mid 90s going, this restaurant life is actually a real job. I can pay the rent, and I'm doing pretty good with this oyster thing. But I didn't really think anything about it when as far as, I wrote a book about oysters, or I built my own knife, but that's as far as I was really going to take. I didn't think it could go any further. Sure, we worked towards the shucking contest, but sure, that's just for fun.
If you could back up a little bit, just for people who don't know, who are listening.
Oh, right.
When you talk about Rodney's, Rodney's is a place that has come up. I think David was the first person who told me about Rodney's like forever ago. And just wondering, when did Rodney's open? Just to give a little bit of background on, maybe, would you call it kind of Canada's first oyster? I don't want to say first oyster restaurant for sure, because the history doesn't doesn't work. But
oyster in Toronto dates back to 1834 when the Erie Canal opened up. You would get boats of oysters coming from New York up into Toronto, and I have papers on Canada's Oyster House at 50 Jarvis Street, which is in a park now, and they would make oysters. The Connecticut Oyster Company would do buckets of oysters or barrels of oysters into Royal York and other hotels. Rodney's Oyster House.
David, wouldn't that also be? We're jumping around here a bit, but in
the same thing in Montreal.
Yeah.
I've seen pictures of the Dominion Square Tavern right next to the Sun Life building. I've seen pictures of gentlemen in long coats and high hats. Mm-hmm. Basically, it was the custom at that time to do your day's work downtown, get in your horse and carriage, because back then Dominion Square was not a park; it was where you parked your horses and your carriages for the gentlemen of the Golden Square Mile. There's pictures of the Dominion Square Tavern full of men drinking porter beer, and there are mountains. Like, when I say a mountain, like the size of a car, of oyster shells on the ground at the end of the bar. And that was like basically the oysters of the day, right? It wasn't a week's accumulation. A gentleman would basically pound 36 to 48 oysters before getting in the carriage and going up to his home. Oysters used to come to Montreal in ballast of boats.
Yeah.
Right. So Montreal would ship products out, because we were a major producer of textiles and, machinery and metal and all kinds of stuff. But the boats would often, when we would ship out to Halifax, not much would come back in the boats, but barrels of oysters. And the purpose of that is that a boat needs to be full, right? Boats are designed, let's say, to carry, I'm just throwing a number out there. A boat is designed to carry like 10 tons. So 10 tons of stuff goes to, Halifax, but 10 tons of stuff has to come back. The boat can't work empty. So,
right.
They would just pack whatever. And one of the cheapest things to pack were barrels of mud and oysters. So all of these bars in Old Montreal and the Golden Square Mile in downtown Montreal, and it's a kind of an ingenious package too, because you could pack oysters in a barrel of mud and put them in the basement of a restaurant, and they would last quite a long time.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. A lot of places in the world, like let's say a lot of places in North America, have that same kind of story. Boston has a version of that. Toronto has a version of that.
New
Portland,
York, probably. Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry to again bounce around, but
That's
if
okay.
I talk about Rodney's,
Yeah.
would you guys, being such oyster nerds, would you say that Rodney's was maybe a restaurant that kind of brought oysters back into style?
It was Rodney's really opened up, I believe it was 87. late 80s. I got there in 92 and started working it there. And it was like one of those little insane little places. It was not, well, it was known in the oyster world. No advertising, basement, no sign per se. It's a bad part of town. It's not really downtown. It's just on the outside of it. You had to know how to get there. And even, those are the delicious things that make great restaurants as it is to this day, and speakeasies in the days before. So it was that excitement of knowing what it is and where to go. And only the oyster people really liked it.
Plus, it works too in a way. Not to cut you off, but you have to consider this one thing. Like it's a Stan Rogers song. There's so many maritime expatriates living in Toronto, not because they want to, because they have to, right? So you've got this population of people, like basically grew up eating oysters and bar clams and and seafood, and so it made sense that Toronto had this basement place. In the early days, I remember going, and you would basically be sitting there with a ton of maritime expatriates.
Yeah. And it was the place to bring, he did bring oysters into the city and really kind of resurrected that concept of going out to eat. There were a few places in Toronto through the early, like the 60s, the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. You would go to the hotels before that. And restaurants were sort of few and far between. They would put an oyster on the menu, but not really focus on it. So it was one of those few places that really did sort of spark that interest of this is what an oyster bar is. With inspiration
so
from...
So they did kind of fall out of favor. If you look at what David was saying about
there was a time.
Eating. So I remember even David in Montreal, like even before Globe, as a restaurant critic, I saw them at Chez Delmo, maybe like you said, in a hotel dining room, maybe somewhere like in Montreal, the Beaver Club, but it was not the oyster scene that we see today, for sure.
Oh, no.
So
when
something happened along the way that they fell out of favor.
Fred and I back in the day, we got bit pretty hard by, we knew John Bill, and we knew, of course, of Patrick, and we knew all the people at Rodney's, and we knew of we were just fascinated by oysters because we Fred and I had been down the rabbit hole of reading old menus and basically doing our research on Montreal history. And the one thing that would keep on popping up in Montreal history was always like, damn, there's oysters on every menu, and not just like and like multiple recipes: oyster soup, oyster chowder, fried oysters, and this was the norm all across the city. So yeah, for sure, there was like this 150-year basically disappearance of them. And when we started purchasing oysters, and I think Patrick will remember, today we have Pickle Point, Raspberry Point, like every point.
There were no points.
No, it was just Malpec oysters.
Malpec,
and
small,
I still
medium, large, extra large, fancy. That's
standards.
Yeah.
But for the people who aren't oyster nerds who are listening to this, when you say Malpec, okay, so this is a variety of oyster.
No, it's the Crossoteria virginica. It's the species of oyster that's native to the East Coast. And it's basically, Malpec means all the oysters of Prince Edward Island. Am I correct to say that, Patrick?
Yeah.
So a Pickle Point is a Malpec.
Yeah.
Technically, you can call any oyster from Prince Edward Island a Malpec oyster. They've acquired the brand a long time ago. When they won gold medal at the Paris World Fair in the 1800s or early 1900s. And so they Malpec is that thing. And most oyster seed comes from Malpec Bay, and they grow it up in the different areas. There's 10 different areas that we really, when we're talking about Marwar now and the taste of the region, there's about 10 different growing regions within Prince Edward Island. So the value of having different names increases when you figure that out as well, when you're talking about the flavor of the oyster and the taste of the oyster, the texture and all. But yes, you can call them Malpec. And Malpec is a technical term or a brand. It's Malpec Bay, which is the region of where most oyster seed comes from.
What's your favorite Malpec oyster right now?
Personally, textural wise, I love the Eastern Shores. So your Surrey, Colville Bay, Fortune Bay, anything with a lot of green to it is fantastic. Rustico's got some beautiful little oysters. New London Bay is great stuff as well. So, I love a little barstool oyster, a little petite one there. Well farmed, easy to open. Even for me, it's easy to open. It's delicious to have, but I like to see this for other people as well. So yeah, I like sort of northern and to the east a little bit on the Prince Edward Island side.
You know what I miss a little bit, Patrick?
Yes.
I miss the old like 90 count Malpec, yes, exactly. I miss the
Something
old
like this.
mud flat tonged, when I say tonged, I said the guys go out in
Yeah.
flat boats
Yeah.
and they would tong the oysters out with these giant double rakes that would go from anywhere from, I don't know, 10 to 20 feet long.
Yeah.
And, back there was this like, I think over the last like 20 years, we've seen a lot of this like basically university aquaculture tray raised oysters. The oysters are really beautiful. They're perfect. The counts are magnificent. But there was a period when, I would say like, my favorite oyster back in the day, like 15 years ago, was just like basically like a 90 count or an 80 count Leslie Hardy oyster. Remember those that were just like,
Yeah.
they were like wild oysters. They came in caked in red mud.
George Carr.
This
Is a George Carr. That's a George Carr from French River.
Yeah.
That's the Carr's oysters, which is rare. You can't see them this side. I think you can see a couple places in Montreal might bring them in.
I used to bring in the Carr's oyster.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a story about that. Once when we opened Joe Beef, we did one of the first events we ever did was this event for this restaurant called Cœur de Cheval. He basically was generous and brought all of his best customers to see us. So John called Carr's, and they went out and they sent us 10 cases of these oysters. Some of them were long like bananas.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just one of the most fantastic harvests of tonged oysters that I'd ever seen, and some of them were 7 inches long.
Still.
Yeah, basically
that's more of a wild oyster, or it's naturally set and then placed within a bed. And the tongers will, if they don't like the size, they put it back and they'll allow it to grow or whatnot. And that's sort of old school of how oyster, and it's still a fishery to this day in Prince Edward Island. It's where you can get some of the wild oysters, and then most of the stuff that we see now, Leslie, is also farmed and aquaculture. So you get that consistency of shell. It's got to have the little teardrop, the deep cup, the flat top. There's things that the farmers are growing towards versus a fisher that's just foraging in the wild.
Yeah, I had some wild oysters in South Carolina, and they were actually very muddy, and there were little crabs inside. And they cooked them on a grill. They barbecued them.
That's classic. Right now, it's oyster roast season, and that's where it opens up from October right till about February or so. And yeah, they come in clusters. You knock them off because that's how they naturally grow. They all grow in clusters, and you break them apart, and then you can use them that way. And
this
oyster crab
Island.
really comes down from about
famous.
Jersey into the Chesapeake Bay region and into the south.
Okay, so this is such a big topic, so we are bouncing around a bit just for the people who are listening. But just to go back, so you were at Rodney's, you went in there, it was like a speakeasy, and then what happened next?
In Oyster World, I worked there for 8.5 years and did very well. This is where I developed the oyster knife and got the technique down, changing the technique from using 2 hands for one thing to separating the hands. So most shuckers now will pick and place with one hand. This is where my kinesiology, sports sciences came into play, figuring out how to work more efficiently, faster for the competition, but it ends up being more efficient for the restaurant production. And so now we can pop out a plate at a very good speed, yet still having an excellent looking plate of oysters. And we really kind of had a great time doing it there. But when I opened up Starfish in 2001, I built my own restaurant from scratch. It sort of looked like this, but I started playing into the varietal of oysters. I would bring in French oysters, really break that not to say that, everyone flies the flag. It's I like Canadian oysters or I like my local oysters. Well, Toronto's not local to anywhere. Same with Montreal. We don't have local water. We have water. It's a lake, but we get very good at importing stuff from all over the place. So British Columbia, West Coast, East Coast oysters, we can also get from the United States as well as Europe. And so when I started going to Ireland, I found this passion for that flavor of this big, bold, oceany oyster. And I got the ability to import that and started working with an importer in Montreal for the French oysters and then myself for the Irish oysters. And that created a palette of flavor of oysters that most people were really interested in. And one day I had, before even the knife came around, I had a publisher come in and said, "Do you want to write a book about oysters?" I'm like, sure. I didn't know how to write anything, so I took about a year to tap something out, and it is what it is. The Oyster Companion, this little thing here, popped out in about a year and had some fun with that. But it's
tell us the name of your book because people can't see what you just held up.
This is called the Oyster Companion. It's my little composium, is my little book about the 5 different species of oysters in North America, and also in a global perspective, looking at, because oysters do come from other places. Back when, again, even at Rodney's, we would talk about the stuff coming from the States. And then when Starfish opened up, I had the Irish oyster. They go, there's oysters in Ireland. I'm like, dude, anywhere ocean touches land, you will find an oyster. So Australia, New Zealand, through Asia, Japan, they've all got oysters. And people were like, but I thought anything just came from like Prince Edward Island. I'm like, they do.
And then they were all the same. Maybe
they're all the same. And then this is where it blows it apart. And so I designed a little tasting wheel or whatnot for the oyster in this book. And that's where the theory of an oyster sommelier, because I when you're into it, and I know David knows this as well. Once you start talking about it, this oyster tastes like this. It's got subtle notes of seaweed grass and steely, clean in the middle, buttery sweetness, and then a flinty or mineral finish to it as well. There's people are like, it's talking like wine. I go, well, strip it back. Don't put lemon. Don't put sauce on it. Don't make it taste like ketchup. And then you aerate. 2-bite chew, aerate, breathe in, and you're going to see you. And people are like, and they tried it, and they're like, oh my God, you're right. And so there's conversions. So there's oyster eaters that know this. And then there's people who dump sauce, and they'll ask me at catering, what do you put on your oysters? I go, nothing. What do you recommend to put on your oysters? I go, nothing. Try that oyster with nothing on it. And meanwhile, they're still spooning stuff. I go, or you could just ask me and just do what you want anyways. But if you do that, you strip it right back and eat it, you're going to find this tastes like the ocean. And I get so excited. I just did a gig in New Brunswick, and there's a new oyster. David, you're going to have to listen to this one. The Bay of Fundy oyster. It's the first time there's anything on the South Shore of New Brunswick coming up. And
interesting.
So, yeah, super great. It's like it's a subtle, sweet, and then a
who's doing that
after it. New group. It's called the Bay of Fundy Oyster Group.
Is it near St. Andrews?
It is near St. Andrews. Yes.
Oh, beautiful spot of the
beautiful
Canada.
area.
Oof.
And it's in the Passamaquoddy Bay area. It's deep enough. And it's yes, there is that 40-foot up at the top of Bay of Fundy, but they've got about a 15 to 20 foot, but it's still in water. So they can do it, but their lines have to be different. So they have to aquaculture it in a way that it coincides with the tidal flush. But that flush as well tumbles the oyster, keeps it clean, makes a super hard shell, like a bell. Like you just tap the two empties together, and it's like a bell. It's so thick.
For people that don't know, that Bay of Fundy tide is like something to behold.
Oh yeah,
it's one of the most impressive tides in the world.
Largest in the world. And so I've always been told, and same with yourself, David, is that no, there's no oysters in the Bay of Fundy because there's too much tidal flush. You can't. No one's growing it there. And I'm like, come on, you mean to tell me it stops in Maine because of the border, and then it carries on into Nova Scotia? No, these folks at the Bay of Fundy have just figured this out. They've only got 40,000 in the water, so you can only get it in St. Andrews at Rossmount Inn. This is the only place you can get it. Right. And so we were lucky enough to try those ones, and it's going to be an up and coming that you're going to see, which is great. New Brunswick had some fantastic oysters this season, and I got to go all the way up to Caraquet and see how it's still done in Caraquet. The Dugas family, he tells me, Jonathan, he goes, oh no, they're what do you use to farm them? He goes, no farm, it's all wild set. And I go, but they're perfect shaped shells. He goes, yeah, it's Mother Nature up this way. I said, baloney. Totally true.
Guys, I love those oysters. They're just fantastic. They're so good. Do they still pack in cedar?
Yeah, wood boxes.
Yeah, beautiful.
A bit of mud on them keeps them happy. Dugas family's been doing that forever.
Great.
I still have I got a 200 count box at my feet right now from the Caraquet area. That's just perfect. The wood box is still the best way to ship any oysters. It keeps it moist. And
that is a great little vacation for anybody who was looking for somewhere to go in Canada. Go to St. Andrews. There's an amazing Kingsbrae Garden there. There's Minister's Island, which is the most insane thing I've seen in my life. You get a real feeling for the Bay of Fundy, and eat some oysters at the Rossmount, which is an excellent restaurant. Yeah.
Oh, crazy good.
Yeah, I'm going to go back next year. So then you did all this. You opened your restaurant.
Right.
You're deep into the oysters. And what you did, and how, I'm interested by these competitions. Is it kind of essential? And also, I'm wondering how many oysters, David, you can shuck in a minute.
I'm pretty rusty. I haven't been shucking that. When you're running a restaurant day in, day out, I was never, let's say, competition wise. I was always just trying to do beautiful. When you're not in a rush, you can just take your time and really
Mm.
shuck properly, like super properly. Just
That's
gorgeous
That's way
dozens.
better. Is
Yeah.
this our goal? This is why the shuckers say that the Canadian championships and the world championships are better. I say this better than the Guinness Book. Guinness Book is just a dog and pony show. It's top off bottom. It's speed. It means virtually nothing. But it's the only one that really gets you that ticket to ride, which is weird. And it wasn't something and it's not. It was very useful for me as a promotional vehicle back before social media.
okay.
So the competitions became that. I saw this as an early marketing idea for my, even at Rodney's. I was saying, like, dude, you should let your shuckers go to these contests, because then we come back, media will pick up on that. We talk to the media, and voila, we have some media press for the restaurant. So when I had Starfish, I said, look, I'll continue with the contest. And that's the year that I actually won. I won the world championships. I won the Guinness Book of World Records. And then it became a media frenzy. So in early 2000s, no social media. There was only media. I called the 5 restaurant reviewers in Toronto, all the papers. When I open up Starfish and I go, hi, I'm Patrick. I just opened my restaurant. Send your reviewer down now, please. like literally left a message like that. We hadn't cooked a thing yet. Martha was so good. She was one of the best chefs ever out there. Martha did a fantastic job, but I hadn't tasted her, even her food. We just literally opened on a Wednesday. And so Wednesday night, I called everybody, and that's how media works. So when the contest hit, it kind of blew up. It got into everything, and really, people came to the restaurant. So I said, although the contest sucks up a lot of time, it's something very intrinsic. It's most valuable as a promotional vehicle for your business. And so if you're a chef and you're promoting yourself, or you're a shucker and you want to do your own business, then it's valuable.
I think all these contests, all these contests in France, everybody who won their version of Top Chef has a restaurant. It's been really good for sommeliers. It's been obviously really good for shuckers. So you're right, especially before social media. What a great way to get noticed.
It is a way to get noticed, and in a like-minded area as well. It's your target market. You're going to people who love this stuff anyways.
I want to ask you guys about seasons, because for a long time it was always the months that ended in R. And now there's a lot of talk that doesn't really exist anymore. So, I would think that right now we're entering major oyster season, but am I wrong?
Go for it, Patrick.
You're not wrong. No, the oyster season was actually first coined in the 1500s in Colchester, England, because that species, the European species of oyster, the one we compete with in Galway, the female holds the young in the gills, oyster caviar, basically in the shell from May until September, when the shells are big enough, and then it goes out into the world and they make their own little oysters. Our species of oysters here in North America, they're called broadcast spawners. They spawn out into the water in the warmer months. They get a little thin and emaciated, and then once winter comes along and they start dropping temperature, then they fatten up and they get very fat to hibernate. Now this is in the icebound region. So oyster season, really, in that months without an R, was based on a European species of oyster. And from the 1500s, that knowledge transferred to when Europeans came over here, and that thought and theory still played in that role. There's the ice in our cold area, which limits how you harvest in the cooler months, but also creates that great, plump, gorgeous oyster. And in the further south, there's going to be temperature times now with global warming where there's harvest limitations in the warmer months. And also rules and regulations of how you have to transport or carry your oyster. As soon as you harvest it, you got to throw it in ice and keep it chilled and blah, blah, blah. There's lots of different regulations. So, but you can get great oysters all year long, 365, depends on the region that you're working with.
And I was in France years ago in Cancale, and they were telling me they have a way now to trick the oysters so you don't get the laiteurs, you don't get the milky, they trick them so they're not. What's that all about?
There's 2 ways of doing it. Old school is tricking them, is putting them into colder water. So you take a batch of oysters. In British Columbia, it's real easy to do. Normally, when you're farming oysters, it's at the top of the water, where there's a lot of food. The phytoplankton is in the water column, where they can eat and feed and grow faster. But when it starts getting too warm, you can drop it. In BC, it's 10 feet out, it's 100 feet down. So you can drop into the cooler water. And so that staves off the reproduction cycle. Second way of doing it now with aquaculture and farming, you crossbreed your oysters so they don't reproduce. So a regular oyster is called a diploid, and a non-reproductive oyster is called a triploid. And in Europe, a lot of places are using triploid oysters now, which do not reproduce. They don't get milky. They get buttery, firm, gorgeous, velvety without crossing over into the milky and sort of thinner style. We haven't quite got into that yet here. There's only a few places that will use triploids and are working, even in the eastern seaboard, will use triploid oysters. But it's like when you crossbreed it, it doesn't reproduce. So you have to get the seed every year from the hatchery. So there's groups of people that do just hatchery. I use hatchery oysters, make the oyster seed, give it to the farmer. The farmer grows them up. The benefit is you get great oysters all year long through the spawning cycle. There is no real down to it. I think a triploid is technically the way to go. But if you want more of a wild set oyster, you will have your seasons. Classically, I did a piece a year or two ago. I do this in the Oyster Master Guild when we talk about the seasons. Classic printed around. You can see the physical difference of an oyster through summer, spring. Spring and fall are sort of, they look the same because there's that crossover period, but there's definitely 4 seasons of oysters and into the winter where it's fat and gorgeous.
David, were you selling oysters all year long at Liverpool House?
For sure. It took a little bit of work, but we always managed to plow through it. You know, there's some farms that are better over the year than others, right? Like let's say Beausoleil's oyster is pretty solid, generally all months, right? Would you agree with that, Patrick?
I would agree. They know what they're doing.
It's and, the Beausoleil oyster as well is a special kind of oyster. Like I'm not promoting them or anything, but I'm just saying it's one of the very few oysters, let's say, grown in Canada. It's like I akin it to a product like Tabasco sauce or Parmesan cheese or you can find Beausoleil oysters everywhere on Earth. They ship. I've had friends have Beausoleil oysters in Dubai. I've had friends have Beausoleil oysters in Europe. I've had friends have Beausoleil oysters in China. I've had friends have Beausoleil oysters, in Italy, in the weirdest of places. So
they do travel well. That's the benefit of our cold water oysters as well, is that they do well in the fridge. And to attune to Beausoleil's packing style, they travel very well. So some oysters don't travel well. You have to go to those locations to find them.
I've also had PEI mussels all over the world. And Newfoundland mussels, in the weirdest places I've had PEI mussels.
The Canadian brand in theory still holds true, and people conceptually outside of our borders do consider it to be cold, clean, gorgeous water, regardless. And it works within the borders as well as outside the borders.
But speaking of cold, clean waters, is it going to be with global warming? I've heard people say that there will be no West Coast oysters in 50 years. Is there a threat to oysters with the water warming up? I mean, are we seeing that certainly down in the southern United States? Mm-hmm. But
we're seeing as well a lot of shade, a lot of problems on the West Coast, especially in Washington there, But I read some interesting article. Maybe you can shed light on this, Patrick, like the cruise ships dumping effluents has really taken its toll on West Coast oysters, I think, south of Vancouver, right?
There's a lot going on. Human impact is the problem of oyster. Oyster will survive through it. So no, I don't think there will ever be a time where oyster will not exist. Whether you can harvest the oyster out of a certain area will change. East Coast example, we have oysters in Newfoundland now. I've been looking for a Newfoundland oyster since early 2000s, but it's not in existence until 2019 when they just opened up because of global warming. West Coast, Pacific, we have a lot of human impact that is, you've got infrastructure, city infrastructure that's aging, as we do here in Toronto and Montreal, everywhere. It needs to be fixed and addressed, but doesn't get addressed. And storms come up, and everything overflows. As far as a cruise ship, there's rules and regulations for them and the distance that they do, or personally, I hope they don't do that. I hope they do take it to port and treat it that way. But yeah, you hear stories here and there that disrupts the way shellfish will be harvested. So when we find those problems, we have to address them right away. A lot of times it's not addressed right away. But our growers, for the most part, do grow in very remote, still wonderfully clean. And I do think that global warming is going to affect, but we will transfer further north. If in 50 years you can't get them in southern British Columbia, you will be able to get them in northern British Columbia.
Leslie, just like a curiosity point, and I think I've spoken about this before, and I think Patrick can riff on this when I start it. Like if you think about the island of New York, right? The island of New York and the Harlem River, the East River, and all that. This is one of the greatest oyster estuaries in the world, right? Like it's one of the reasons why New York is populated the way it is when people got off boats and landed on the island of Manhattan with nothing, like wild poverty. You could go down to low tide and eat 7 or 8 oysters and live another day, and live another day, and live another day, and eventually find a job and be able to eat a little bit of beef, right? Right. Still today, oysters grow. There's all kinds of oyster projects as well, like to clean up the East River and the Harlem River. But this was one of the greatest like oyster sanctuaries in the world. Now, for sure, we don't want to eat oysters, from anywhere around Manhattan or the Harlem River, but in
the Halifax Harbor, they had lobsters right there. The people, and now I was just in Halifax last week, and I'm looking down, and I'm like, I don't think anybody's fishing out of here,
Yeah, you have your fishing zones and stuff. And yes, New York, the Billion Oyster Project is doing a great job. And over the past 10 years, their mandate is to input 10 billion oysters into the water. So they do the oyster
to clean the water?
To clean the water.
To filter, but you wouldn't want to eat those oysters, would you?
No, it's a non-harvestable zone. But what it does is it does two things. It helps clean the water, but it also helps mitigate erosion. Without the oyster shell and the oyster reef, you get water washing away the land. And so the reefs, as they come up, do many different things in helping stop erosion, helping build those mother reefs to help the environment. And then everything else comes back in, from seaweeds to fish to seahorses to dolphins. I believe dolphins and whales were seen in East River for the first time in a long time, because the waters are getting that much cleaner because of this project. And it's just upcycling shells from restaurants, curing them and putting them back into the water, not seeded, but the oysters will just perpetually produce more oysters. So yeah, it's a non-harvestable zone, but it's still, those oysters though, as well, when they spawn off, they will float and they will be taken to other regions that are harvestable. So the wild oyster still goes and travels in its own world to regions where you can harvest it up in the top of Long Island. So there's, wherever it goes, it's going to be beneficial.
On the subject of global warming too, though, I saw a documentary last week about oyster farmers in Nova Scotia, and what they really almost killed them were hurricanes. And the devastation of these farms, I couldn't believe the footage of, and then they kept going, but in 24 hours, your whole everything just completely washed up and wrecked.
Any farmer's going to have that situation anywhere. Weather and weather patterns have changed in our time, and we see that as an oyster shucker since the early 90s, mid 90s. I've seen changes through my own restaurants as well of salmon sizes from wild salmons, and the changes are quick. And weather patterns is probably going to be more devastation than the actual water temperature. And we hear about the acidification of water as well. The oysters being carbon sequesters are very beneficial to the world in that sense, as well as taking the carbon out to create shells. And the ones that are big enough will survive, and the whole works, and just build better environment. But you will see that with weather, and hurricanes will totally take everything.
Did you guys, listening to both of you, I realized that you seem to have a relationship with some of the oyster suppliers. Like when you would order for your restaurant, are you picking specific farms, or are you just saying, send me this? How does that work? Do you guys get to know them, the farmers?
Let's say from the restaurant standpoint, it used to be not complicated. There used to be like 7 oysters maybe you could choose from, and different sizes, of course. And then it got complicated later on. But then, some people don't care, but, let's say I did. And I was just always looking for the best oyster that I could get always at the restaurant. So I was always curious. I'd go to the fish market, look at the fish, but I would be sooner than looking at the fish. I would be really inspecting oyster boxes. Is this oyster box frosted? Are all the oysters, when I say frosted, like sometimes they put the really nice oysters on the top of the box. So if you look, they're really nice,
like
but at the bottom, some are bent.
Like a cake.
Like a
icing
cake.
on the top.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
that's how the old school wild fishers would do it. They would do their choice on the top and the standards underneath, and you'd get this icing through the layer, like da. But you get to know who does that too, though. But your great question. I like to say no more than your wholesaler, because you as a restaurateur, David, as you know, you are absolutely limited to what you put on your menu. You're dictated more or less by your wholesaler of what food you're getting in. So that's why you want to go to the foraging and finding the stuff that nobody else has. That's your USP, your unique selling proposition. So what ingredients do you have? That's your thing. And to know more about the oyster in my world and other fishes, everything in my starfish world was oysters at this level. Everything else has to match that level. So our fish, our vegetable program, our meat program, even though we did meat, we did a single steak. Ribeye, steak frites, and it's sort of the first time in Toronto at the time where an oyster bar had meat on the menu, because I listened to my customers back at Rodney's. They would complain. 1 out of 4 would complain there's no meat on the menu. Anyways, you want to find your ingredient, and so that's how we, in this level of oystering, we got to know more than the wholesaler. We used wholesalers for what they do. They're wheels, so they can at volume get you a better price. So I'd rather haggle the price with a wholesaler. I will not haggle price with growers. How much do you want for yours? So I had a combination of buying direct from some people, George Dowdle, Green Gables oysters. I would buy minimum supply you need to do is 3,000 oysters. So to get Midland and then Midland would truck it, comes to your door. That was my best price. So I had a blend of standards, which I used for the happy hour, and then choice, which I put into the restaurant, and just everybody's happy type of thing. But I would kill that. I would shuck that in a week of that one oyster. But then I had 10 to 20 different oysters as well, which is far too many for any restaurant to actually understand. But in a 60-seat joint, it's actually ridiculous. But so yeah, you have to know both. You got to know the wholesalers. You got to know what's in their thing, because they can give you a good price too. And if they have the good oysters at a good price, fine, I'm going to use you. That's fine with me. But you also go and find some interesting stuff and get them direct.
But speaking of price, I actually sent David a text while I was in Nova Scotia, because I was looking at the menus and I was saying $3.50 per oyster, $3.75 per oyster. I'm like, gone are the days of the dollar oyster. What should people be paying now for what's a fair price now in a restaurant for an oyster?
It depends very much on the size, the oyster, the grade. You can still get dollar oysters, but they'll be really difficult to shuck, and they'll be like kind of small, bent, standard oysters, kind of from Malpec. It's still doable, right?
Here's your question, David. Though, do you know how many oysters get lost? Like, what's your food loss count on a standard box of oysters?
Well, exactly. That's the problem with the standard oysters.
Then
explain. What do you mean?
So in a Beausoleil, you're going to get 99.5% of oysters going to the consumer.
Because each oyster is perfect, Leslie, right?
Perfect.
So you shuck 12, you have 12.
You will.
Right.
It costs a bit more.
Whereas a standard oyster,
no loss.
You might have to shuck 18 to get 12.
Exactly. So you lose 6. So therefore, instead of paying, let's say it's 80 cents an oyster, now you're paying 85 to 90 cents an oyster. Does that actually equate in the bottom line? So you have to think about those things. There's times and places for those types of oysters. And we like to support the wild fishers as well at the same time. But yeah, gone are the day of the dollar oyster. The dollar oyster will still be there. It's going to be a lost leader. There's a couple of places in Toronto that still promote it. I came up with this idea. I don't do buck a shuck. I did 100 for 100. And I thought, this is at Starfish. I go, it's perfect, because I'm not going to nobody's ever going to order 100 oysters. First day in on a Friday, guy looks at me, he goes, you're doing 100 oysters for $100? I go, yeah. He goes, we'll take 2. I went, two oysters? He goes, no, 200. And my number one shucker, Lawrence, is looking at me, goes,
I hate
No,
you.
no way. No, okay. I'll do the hundreds. You do the everybody else in the restaurant. So I had to do and I was the slave to the 100. I would do it 33 at a time. And I had, once you get two people wanting hundreds, and I'm like 33 for you, 33, and split them up. It was bonkers. I would now do this as a pre-shuck. I'd have another program called Go Shuck Yourself at Cayley Cottage, where you can get a 90-cent oyster. You get a bucket and a knife. Go shuck them yourself.
Oh, do it yourself.
Go shuck yourself. Absolutely.
Right.
And you can get them at that wholesale price. If you want to have a softer price or inexpensive or fair priced oysters, nowadays you're looking at, yes, oysters are running around $3 at a regular price. Because if you want to talk about traditional food markups, oysters do cost anywhere from 90 cents landed in the city, and is good. You can get them at that price, but we're talking now $1.25, depending on the heritage, the rarity. There's lots of different ways of charging up to. I would bring in the Irish oysters. They would be $2.25 an oyster per. So if you want to mark it up, 3 times to 4 times, that's $8-9 an oyster. I'm not selling it for that. I came up with an idea for the European, for the rare, wonderful oysters that were more expensive. I had to have them on the menu mainly for me, and then anyone else who kind of liked them. I would short stock them, so I would run out, but I would also do a flat rate fee. I wouldn't charge the markup of the percentage. I figured out what a good price that I was making on my Malbec oysters that I do high volume. I figured it as about $1.45. So I tagged $1.45 on it to $2.25, and it came to just under $4.95 was the max that I would charge for oysters for those rare and wonderful ones. And when people ask, what oysters should I have? I go, definitely you should have any of the European product, because
you're making more.
You're getting more value out of it. It costs a lot of money to get this oyster in, and I'm only charging this when I should be charging 4 times as much.
But it's also the time for the employee to shuck everything. So it's not just the cost of the oyster, it's the cost of the employee.
It's true. That's where the wild oyster becomes harder to open. If you're going to put a wild oyster on because you think it's inexpensive, your time of labor, how long does it take, shucker X to open up 12 and plate them down? Standard oysters are going to take, like David said, 18 for 12. You've got food loss on those 6. Where did those go? Or 4 oysters, whatever.
Are those dead, by the way, or they're just broken?
Combination, broken, dead. But you got to be able to filter that out, as you want to save some of it. If it's a loss, you want to put that into a can and put it to the kitchen, make a soup out of it later. So it's not a full loss. But if there is going to be a loss, there's a loss. So you want to balance that out and how long it takes to put out that oyster. So, you come up with those ideas of what the idea of the cost of the plate of oysters is. But to have them there, it's, yes, the cost of oysters, what you should be paying now, is in the $3 zone on a regular day for a regular, but you want to have some value to that as well. The value can come back in the knowledge and the story that the shucker and the servers tell you. This is the heritage of this oyster. This is a Bay Fortune oyster, lovely green shell on the outside, shows you the nutrient density that it's living in, produces this wonderful flavor of ocean with sea greens in the finish of it. You're going to enjoy it completely. That adds value to that oyster rather than just like, here's your box of oysters, see you later.
How long did your 100 for 100 last, by the way?
I pulled it after about 6 months, 8 months. I pulled it when I had a table come in. They booked it. They booked the table. Table 23 is my big table. They booked it for 7:30 on a Friday. They came in, they sat down, they go, we'll have 600s and we're going to share a bowl of soup. And I'm like, okay, this is just no longer feasible, because this is a $500 table is now just turned into a $100 table. And it's just like, okay, I got to pull this back and figure out how to do this. In future renditions of the 100, I would probably do it as a pre-shucked. What time are you coming in? You're coming in at 7:30. That 100 is going to sit on your table at 7:30.
Right. But what a show to watch you shucking 100 oysters really quickly,
We're shucking anyways,
Yeah, it's a show,
It is. It ends up being the show type of thing. But, when you've got 4 tables asking for 300 each, you're only getting 33 at a time. It's not quite as good a show. When you want that big pile of oysters to show up on your table, that's more of a sit-down show, I think.
There was a restaurant here that did a promotion in the summer, at the end of the summer, for all the oysters and champagne you could drink for $100 a person.
Nice.
And it started off really slowly, and then some influencer came in, and then they have to cut it because they were losing so much money on. People would sit down, set up, and just say, bring it on, and then so they stopped it.
There are people, once they get stuck in, they'll consume a lot of oysters. I did that. I with the 100, I actually didn't pull champagne. I got the old baby duck out. I had a magnum of duck and a plate of oysters for $100. I mean, like it was, I came up with weird ideas all the time. That was back when I did vortex pricing as well. Remember when the weather's so bad, the weather magicians, they say in TV, oh, don't go to work. It's a polar vortex. You're going to freeze to death. You'll never survive. And in Torontonians, they're made of sugar. They will say, oh, it's too cold. I'm not going to go to work. So I would come down. There was nobody there. So I did polar vortex pricing. I go, whatever the weather person says, minus 30, you get 35% off your dinner. Minus 28, 28% off your dinner. Come on down. And you come up with the weird ideas to get media and people to talk about it.
Are oysters a good way to make money in a restaurant? The two of you, did you, is it a money maker in the end? Well, for you, if it's the main event, that's different,
It's part of the
it's a necessary evil. My idea of a perfect meal at a restaurant was basically sit down, get a drink, order oysters, an appetizer, a main course, and go home. Right? Some other people prefer like the appetizer, main course, dessert, and go home. That's every restaurant I've built has always been focused around the oyster bar.
Well, you kind of got the trend going, David.
I'd say, but many times I did the math on it, and the shucker plus this plus that. I was always like, this isn't the greatest. This isn't the greatest point of revenue I have at the restaurant. When you look at a bottle of wine, let's say, which is a non-perishable piece of inventory that I get to, mark up 2.5 or 3.5 times, depending on what wine it is, and basically take it from the fridge to the table, that's a great source of revenue. So is a quick, Campari soda, great source of revenue. Chicken, squid, great source of revenue. Some things are not great sources of revenue. Fancy steaks, this and that. So, it is what it is, but I just work it into the costs. I just can't imagine having a restaurant that doesn't have a fantastic oyster program. Just for myself, I would just feel like there's something completely missing. Right? It's like opening a restaurant with no desserts,
Yeah.
Like I need in Europe, it's important. In England, it's important. In New York, it's important. In Boston, it's important. And I remember as a young chef, I was like, why do we not do that here? Was it like, I don't understand, it was always important for me that one of the first things you see when you walk into any of my restaurants was like the oyster dominance, the best position for the public to view, right?
It's a great draw if you because North American style is and it comes from, I guess, European as well, as shucking outside on the floor. In Paris, they do it on the street in front of the restaurant. It's that idea and concept of the atelier is working their product, and it's enticing to come into the restaurant. Here in North America, it's split sort of 50-50. Half the time when I ask people when they're just saying, can you help us with our program? I'm like, where do you shuck the oysters? In the kitchen. I'm like, well, there's no physical show. If you want to build your program, you should put it up onto the bar because it's one, visual. Two, the bartenders can do a little bit more than bartending. They can shuck as well. And training people into that kind of level, I think, would be very important. And it really sort of fits the bill to do two things. You're making cocktails, you shuck a few oysters, or have someone designated when you get that busy to be dedicated oyster shucker. That's where you can really sort of level it up. And then that ingredient that can put $20 to $40 to $50 on a bill. That's where it becomes valuable. You're adding, instead of $100 bill, now it's a $150 bill because you had a plate of oysters to start with. It becomes that revenue stream and all you're doing is putting oysters on ice as a little display. You have a small backup in the fridge and one person opening, but also serving customers. It's a combination. They're a hybrid position.
There was a culture, early on in restaurants in Montreal, it always like basically, it was like, let the dishwasher shuck the oysters. And I was like, what the hell is going on? I think the most important person in the restaurant should be in charge of shucking oysters. Not the least important, right? This is a raw bivalve. It's a live seafood that you're shucking, that you're opening, and a person is letting you have the like, it's a giant responsibility to give raw seafood to customers. It's to be
Huge.
taken very, very seriously. Let's say a steak, a chicken, a shrimp. These are like lesser so, right? But you possibly want your best, conscientious, hygienic,
Knowledgeable.
knowledgeable person at your restaurant opening oysters for your people.
Absolutely.
For a long time, it was me or Fred, or we opened Joe Beef. We were lucky to have John Bill and his trophy behind the bar. We had basically at that time, one of the best guys in Canada shucking oysters. So it was a serious thing, right? Not being serious about raw seafood is like horrifying.
It's kind of bonkers, but a lot of restaurants will still do that. You ask pretty well anyone. I go, who's your shucker? Dishwasher, busboy. I came from busboy stock, right? And so that's how I grew it up, but we get more professional. That's where we have to train these people as well. This is where I'm pushing for this through Oyster Master Guild, which is my little online training thing with Julie Chu, but we're pushing it into culinary schools.
Have a certificate for the shuckers.
Patrick, talk about Oyster Master Guild. I've been noticing that on your feed, but
there is no, as we just discussed, there's no lesson plan for oysters. It is a completely apprentice moment, and most restaurants will give it to the dishwasher or busboy, who is the lowest common denominator within the kitchen. I think most chefs either fear injuring themselves through oyster knife injury, happens, but you have to learn knife skills before you become a chef to julienne, to cut and to not cut yourself, etc. But they rarely do teach oyster in this world. And I know this from teaching for the past since 2017. It's one day in your first semester that Patrick comes in and says, hey, this is what you're going to do. And you get about an hour. So I'm creating this program. Oyster Master Guild is a training and certification program that teaches people more about oysters in both the sommelier concept and the professional shucker concept. An oyster sommelier would be a person who understands all about the oyster, can run an oyster program for a restaurant, from sourcing, finding, handling, and then training up the crew, and also providing education and interesting points for consumers, for restaurant patrons to come in and enjoy themselves. And the shucker has to learn how to be professional. It's very easy to watch Instagram and see who's a good shucker and who's not a good shucker. And even there's high-end restaurants, like there's one food TV famous chef posted out his shot out of New York, said, this is my oyster tower, and his oysters were like Moulinex, terrible. And I use this as an image, and then this one is my shuck than this. And I go people to folks, choose which oyster do you like better? Well, this one. One of them is a famous chef. Which do you think it is? Well, it's this one. No, it's this one actually. Wow. And it's because they don't actually know. So this is a training program and a concept to teach people of what a properly shucked oyster is and how to taste it properly. What's the difference between this oyster and that oyster, even within the same species? We have 5 different species. We go from that. So Oyster Master Guild is that training and certification concept. And we're just building into our level 3, which is more the professional end of things. But in the end, what we're going to have is professional, and we've seen our students. One of them is at Crave Fish Bar. Jeremy, he's fantastic, and he now speaks about oysters to his clients, and their sales go up because the knowledge and the confidence comes out on the other end. If you have knowledgeable people, even the service staff, even though they may not be shucking, but they can have those words from, like any sommelier, wine sommelier will tell, this is our wine today that we're showing. If you have some of the words, you tell the clients or customers, they will buy into it. Because they're not buying your food or your drink, they're buying the story.
I love it.
That's what they're doing.
I love it.
And so we're creating the storyline and standardization of storyline, because there is no standard. There's many different ways of shucking an oyster, but in the end, the oyster should look a certain way. Doesn't matter to me how you open, in your hand, on your head, sitting down. It's easier if you stand up, but so we train proper ways of doing it, but really it's the proper results and to reduce your food cost.
You guys must have both faced a lot of people who come up to the bar and say, I don't like oysters. How do you get somebody who doesn't like oysters into oysters?
Quite easy. I always say you must have had a bad one. You want to try one with me? Right? As simple as that, right? It's just
It could not even, it might not even be a bad one. It's a bad experience. Sometimes it's the person who
Poorly shucked is a good reason to hate oysters.
Again, everything about it is apprentice. How your first oyster experience will set your tone for the rest of your life, really, until you meet someone like David or myself, who is like, and this happens all the time. You get the conversions, the born again virgins. You have oyster virgins who have never had it before, and they walk down, they're trepidatious about certain things. And if they're really, really apprehensive, there's ways of working it in. I could just try the water first, and then they go, oh, that's great. And then I go, that's with a meaty texture. You bite it, you chew it. And it's the swallowers who like, oh, you only swallow oysters. I go, well, who told you that? Do you swallow your salad? No, you chew your salad. So chew your oysters as well, and you'll get that better experience. And so we work it through and talk about it like a sommelier talks about wine. You talk about the subtle nuances you're going to experience on this oyster, and people will try it about 90% of the time. There's still going to be people who are texturally challenged and don't understand it, don't want it for the texture. But there's many, many more conversions of, I had an oyster I did not like. I either haven't tried or I've tried it before and I don't like it. And I have this one story of a lovely old couple. They're about 80 years old in at Starfish, and husband was eating oysters. Wife was not eating oysters. And I said, you're not eating oysters, love? She goes, no, I'm from Nova Scotia. My mom always tried me to have me have oysters up from Cape Breton, and no, I'm never going to eat them. And husband goes, don't even try. So I popped up a little Olympia. An Olympia oyster is about the size of a toonie or a loony. It's a tiny little thing. For 5 years growth, it's our native oyster to North America on the West Coast. Big oceany flavor. And so I popped one up and put it onto a martini glass presentation. We're doing a single taste for someone. She goes, what's that? I go, this is an Olympia oyster. It comes from Washington State, and this is what it tastes like. I walked her through the tasting, and it's just a lovely little thing. It's going to a client over there. I have to go to the kitchen for 1 sec. I'll be right back. Came back, the oyster's gone off the martini glass, and I look down, I look up, and husband's crying. I go, what's wrong? She ate the oyster. She ate the oyster. She likes it. What? He's crying now. She's going, can I try another oyster? I go, absolutely. Full stop. David, I got like 15 plates in line. Like it's Friday night at 8:00. I don't have time,
but then you have to stop and you just have to.
And I'm serving this woman this oyster. So she has 5 or 6, and she goes, I can't believe I've denied myself this experience all my life. I have to tell my mom.
And that is the joy of the restaurant industry. That's one of the great joys of the restaurant industry.
Exactly.
No.
And that's what it is. It's the turnover. If she's being 80, I said, your mom's still alive. Don't ever say that to your
how old's her mom?
Don't ever say that to your clients. Your mom's still alive. Here's my cell phone. So I gave her my cell phone. And back in early 2000s, no one did it. Here's my cell phone. Call her. Beep, bop, boop, boop. Hi, mom. Yeah, I'm in Toronto. I'm eating oysters. Yeah, I love them. Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, I know. I'm an idiot. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. And so she apologized to her mom in front of me, but now she enjoyed the oyster, and she had that dismay. I can't believe I've denied myself that experience. So it teaches another thing. Just someone gives you food, experience it.
I think
may
also
not be your cup of tea, but you got to try it.
You guys are anti-toppings on oysters, which I totally understand, but I think it might be a way to get people into oysters, and gradually they diminish the topping. It's a little bit like coffee. Nobody wants to drink it black. They start by putting shitloads of milk and sugar in there, and eventually just pull it all away. So I'm just saying a little mignonette, and then maybe one day, no. What do you think?
I put them, but if I'm checking for people at the bar, let's say, I discourage it. I just sometimes I don't put lemon, and I don't put the cocktails. I was even the horseradish that gets on my nerves. That actually, I used to grate my horseradish fresh, and then I realized one day I actually like the food service horseradish better, not because it's easier, just because I thought it tasted better and it was stronger.
Well, anyway. You have to detail your horseradish. I had an old fella once. He says, you got to soak your horseradish in water for a week. To reconstitute it, and then you grate it, and then it becomes perfect. And the other way of doing it, of course, is great. I take this out catering, grate it, mason jar, vodka over top, and then it stays crisp, white, boozy, and
yum.
Yeah, easier. But I agree. There's a time and place for toppings, and the way I tell people, and I've had customers come up to me and they're like, "I'm so sorry, I have to have sauce on my oyster." They're like, "You're a big person. You can do whatever you want." But I'll tell the first timers, whenever you're trying your first oyster, if you've been to a restaurant or not, try the first 1 or 2 without any sauce, because then the palate will understand what you're experiencing. And maybe you do need a little sauce, or maybe you're missing that, or maybe chef has created something wild and wonderful. So try your first one without. 2-bite chew, aerate, and get that full experience of the ocean and really set your palate to that moment. But there is a time and place for sauces. I do bring sauces with me. People don't even use them, because I'll tell them I have it like this. Or if I'm doing my latest one now is pairing oyster with whiskey, and you eat the oyster first. This is my technique. You eat the oyster first, put the whiskey into the shell with a little bit of the liquor, then sip the whiskey from the shell. It does 3 things. 1, no sauce or lemon on the oyster. Because what are you're gonna drink whiskey and put ketchup in your mouth? No, you're not gonna do that. So try it this way. 2, the salt water pops that caramel flavor, lowers the alcohol content on that sip of whiskey, and it really does finish the deal. And most everyone goes, I don't like whiskey. I love this. I don't like oysters. I love this. What's going on? And they go, well, it's something that's magical on the palate, but you're going to have to experience it in a certain way. I've gone to gigs now where I don't even bring a lemon. I've dropped my lemon count. Food costing here's chef. I'm telling chef. I've dropped my food count down. I cut my lemons into 16ths now, beyond the 8 wedge. With 8 wedge, I'll do in the restaurant on a tray, but catering, I'd put them into 16th, little squishies. And for 1,000 oysters, I'll go through 10 lemons. That's it. And you drop your count down to absolutely nothing, because people are trying it without anything on it. And it's the words that you use. It's how you express the thought towards it. And it's that's concept of oyster sommelier that describes the oyster to a way that people don't want to try it with sauce. And then they'll go, well, I go, you can have sauce on it. That's perfectly fine. Try the first one. And they go, you know what? This is great. I'm just going to try this without. I'm like, fine. That's how it goes. Caviar is the thing now that everyone's sort of bumping into. And again, it's delicious. Don't get me wrong. It's very expensive, but if it's the experience that you're looking for, then that can be fun too.
Patrick used to do this cool thing when he used to shuck at Starfish. I think he used to have those basically $100 toaster oven from Walmart.
Oh, the Black & Decker.
Yeah, he used to have a Black & Decker. So beneath his oyster shucking station, I presume at knee height, he would have a Black & Decker toaster oven plugged in under there, and he'd shuck. Was it 3 or 4? 2?
Yeah, whatever the number was.
I think he made me 4 Galway flats.
Yeah.
With just basically garlic, parsley, butter.
Yep.
Unbelievable, right?
So you like them cooked. You like them cooked too. So it's
of course,
yeah, for sure. They're great cook, especially an oyster like that, right?
Well, when you go to Galway, when you go to Mourns of the Weir, if you go and say, "Hey, Patrick sent me from Toronto," they'll say, "Well, you got to sit over here." They already know your order. You're going to get 2 pints of Guinness. You're going to get a 6 plate of the natives. You're going to get a 6 plate of the garlic oysters. And by the time those 2 come out, you're going to have a seafood platter after that. Your second pint of Guinness is already on the pour. This is what you have to have. The garlic oysters are insane. And the fun thing with the toaster oven, I've actually moved it up on top of the bar because it was more convenient. Because people say, "What are you doing?" I'm making garlic oysters in my toaster oven. And so you toast it up above, and people are like, garlic instantly. Whenever you have garlic in a dining room, everyone's like, "I want to have that as well." What's going on? You're drooling so much, so you got to have it.
Yeah. The smell at the bar, you'd be eating raw oysters, and then you're like, "Hang on,
garlic butter.
What's that?"
Hey, and now what I do as well, I do a smoked oyster under a dome, and so it's like a smoked cocktail. So I have a dome that fits over my tray. I do a little. I'm using Irish turf, so I've got turf from Ireland, and I smoke the oyster, and it just gives this poof. And it's Instagram worthy because you raise it up and all the smoke goes everywhere. And then people grab an oyster and they try it. They go, it's fresh, cold, chilled, fresh shucked. It's been smoked for about 32 seconds. And it's just that kiss of smoke that gives it the next dimension. And people are like,
where'd you get the turf? How'd you get did you smuggle in the turf, Patrick?
I got a guy. We don't talk about, I got a guy in South. He's a Southie. We don't talk about the boys in Boston, right? They know, we know who they are.
Now, with a name like Patrick McMurray, you're obviously Irish yourself.
We get hooked up. Yeah.
How many generations in are you?
Only the one, actually. My grandparents came from County Antrim. And I learned this one in 96, the first year I went to hit the Worlds. Introduced up on stage, and here's Patrick from Toronto, blah, blah, blah. Patrick McMurray representing Canada. Everyone goes, and it's 2,000 people in the tent. They're going, yay. The die's down. One voice in the back of the tent goes, "Where are you from?" I like, "From Toronto." He goes, no, boyo. "Where are you from?" And my dad told me back in the 70s, he goes, if you can't remember the city or town that you're from, you got to remember the county. They say it like this in Ireland. So you have to remember this. And this all flashed back in a second. And when I answered this guy in the middle, I go, County Antrim. And that, like that, the whole place, rah, and the microphone guy on the mic, Michael, he goes, the boys come home. And so I got reintroduced into the family, tribe aspect of what it is to be an Irish background. And I was lost in translation for a generation or two with how I grew up. But it was one of those inspirational moments where I got reintroduced. I'm in the oyster world. I'm reintroduced into the Irish world. I had found some little Irish bars and it started formulating what I wanted my own, if I was to do an Irish bar, what I would like to see it. And that's what Cayley Cottage became back in the day as well.
Is that your favorite place to eat oysters in Ireland?
I just got back from that. That's one of my favorite places. But really, your favorite place to eat oysters is when your toes are in the water. Every experience, every grower is the best grower in the world. They will tell you that. They have the best oysters in the world. And it's true, when your toes are in the water, your best experience is going to be within that world. Places like Coffin Bay in Australia, they have this turquoise water and this experience where you could actually sit in hip waders at a table, pouring out wine, eating oysters, and your bum's in the water. And it's just like, I got to go there. That'll be one of the most exciting experience. And it's a great oyster as well. Like, I want to experience these things, and that's the best way of trying it.
David, do you have a favorite place for eating oysters, David?
It's funny. I love eating oysters at still Rodney's. Like, when I go, like, if ever I have to go to Toronto for whatever reason, there's no way that when I get off the plane, it's not where I'm going immediately, right? Just because it's been, so long, from the old space to the new space. I've had long relationships with people who work there, and plus the new place. Like, I don't know, man. Patrick, what do you think about the live tanks? There's some wild creatures inside those live tanks.
Well, they do a great job of bringing in product, because they have the customer, the demand that goes with it. It's king crab season now, and they're sourcing from Norway and everywhere that you can.
Dungeness crabs, plus the oyster selection's always, so it's a really special place to eat naked seafood, right?
Oh, you can keep your clothes on if you want to. They have that back room if you want to get naked.
Yeah.
Well, I have one last question. Okay. Now, this is a shucking question. I've heard many debates on this. When you shuck an oyster, do you dump the liquor and let it remake its own?
Personally, I leave it up to the client or customer to do what they wish. I think that the oysters, the liquor, all the water in there is part of that snapshot of the bay that it came in. So yes. And there are growers that will insist. DK Connemara in Ireland insists that you tipple it out 3 times. So you
three times.
3 times. And I've watched this happen, and it does actually effectively work. It's a very French concept of tipping out the liquor, because the first liquor is the seawater. Then the true liquor, and you set it on the bed, you tip it out, you set it back onto your tray of ice or whatever, and you watch. The oyster does 2 things. One, it atrophies, the meat shrinks, which gives it the illusion of water coming out. And it does have more liquor from the inside. So it deflates a little bit and it gets a little smaller. So the liquor, which tends to be sweeter, not as salty, briny. But man, I like that taste of the ocean. I'm from the city, man. I got to have the brine. DK Connemara, he literally goes once, sets it, has a conversation twice, sets it. And then the third time, it's like, this is the true taste of this liquor. And you'll have to experiment with that for yourself. Find a place that has a pro shucker, shuck it nicely, lots of liquor left behind, and try it. Try one with tippling, one without, and try and see what happens.
3 times. Wow, I'm surprised it's not dry. Wow. And David, what about you?
It wasn't actually dry.
No, just shuck and eat.
Yeah, that's shuck and eat. Okay.
That's the way I do it myself as well. I just eat it right away. But there is that theory.
Well, thanks to guys like you that we're eating so many great oysters. I really mean, I can speak for Montreal, but the first time I saw oysters in a restaurant were at Globe. The first time I saw a seafood tower was at Globe. And I think there are tons of oysters now in Montreal, often properly done, well shucked. It's a whole different scene from just getting something tossed at you in the past. And it's because of guys like you that we're eating such beautiful oysters.
The funny thing is like one of the greatest, what we were doing in Montreal then was like already the boys in Toronto were already way ahead,
Oh,
right? So
wait, Toronto was ahead of us, David?
oh
Wait
yeah,
a minute.
100%. Like God, I was the only guy shucking oysters in Montreal with Fred. We met John Bill because he was bringing oysters to Toronto, not Montreal. You know, and we got basically our oyster culture at that time, from Toronto. Oddly, as you know, I'm in love with the great state of Maine, and I love going there. They do a terrible job in Maine at oysters. It's
Hmm.
impossible to find oysters. They grow great oysters. I'm a
Oh my
big
God.
fan of the oysters of Maine,
Yeah.
huge fan. Uh, but I can't, I spent 2 weeks there every summer, and a dozen oysters shucked is few and far between. It's almost
Mm.
wild. It's like not even part of the culture, I'd say. Maybe when you get north of Rockland up there, where no, south of Rockland a little bit, but it's just not something people eat. It's an export product, right? So it's kind of strange. Toronto does some sort of better job than they do somehow in PEI sometimes. You get what I'm saying?
Well, back in the day, yeah. When I was working at Rodney's in the 90s, they was like, well, I'm going to PI. Where do we go for good oysters? I'm like, you're sitting at it right here.
Yeah,
You have to,
exactly.
you got to go to, I could call George. You'll go sit in his garage and,
Yeah,
he'll pop a few of his grown oysters, but there's no places to go and eat oysters. It's
yeah.
Now,
evolved.
is it better now?
Now it's better. Yeah. There's probably about 5 or 6 places that are of note that you could go to that does a very good job.
And in
Um,
Halifax, do you have any recommendations? And the big place is the Press Gang, I think, for
yeah,
oysters,
I would say.
but kind of everybody has
But
them.
still, it's not much, right? If you think about
No,
it, it's really not much.
But
nope.
why, David, would Toronto be, if you look at the culture of eating oysters, if you go to Paris
You know what?
in the winter,
We were the consumer
We're the
of
consumer. There's
oysters.
a
Look at
bigger
Paris,
volume of
though.
people. Yeah.
Look at
Well,
Paris. There's more oysters being eaten in Paris, which is landlocked,
right?
than there are, in the oyster producing regions, right?
coastal
So,
regions. Yep.
So why would Montreal have fallen out? Why Toronto more so than
Personally, I think
Montreal?
Montreal's got a better variety of oysters. I've got French and Irish oysters arriving to my door in about 10 minutes from Montreal, because
Oh,
you now have the variety of oysters that you can get, because there's a higher percentage of oyster eaters that I feel. So you've got a lot from the States, as well as varietal wise differences. Toronto, not so much. COVID did a lot of things, changed a lot of things in the world of the restaurant world, let alone. And then everything sort of just came back and we're starting basically fresh and new. So there's very few places that you can find a huge variety into different countries, nations, and species wise. Rodney still does it, but smaller than what it used to. I still think Montreal's got a better ability to get that variety of oysters going. I think it's that French and European mentality, though, as well.
hmm.
yeah, well,
Interesting.
there's a lot of restaurants that I don't want to say taken on the Joe Beef model, but there's a lot of restaurants now that,
I'll say
definitely,
that.
yeah,
I'll say it. If you can't, I'll say it. Okay.
there's a lot of restaurants that, small restaurants like that look like Joe Beef that
Mm.
have an oyster counter. It's just part of the Montreal restaurant thing now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
Who's
I would
bringing
also
in who's the shipper for the Irish oysters in Montreal? Is it
So
Johnny?
you got two people. You got La Boîte aux Huîtres. So it's Luciano
All right.
is bringing in a lot of the French. Then you have Oysters and Caviar. That's doing Luciano does the French and the Irish, as well as American, as well as Canadian. He's got a great variety of oysters up there.
He's La Boîte
Oyster,
aux Huîtres.
La Boîte aux Huîtres. Yeah.
God, I don't even know this guy. Wow,
And what
amazing.
French oysters? Bouillon, fin de clair. What?
At the moment, yeah, he's got Cataret. Now we can talk in houses. So there's Cataret is a house. They will grow a fin de clair, which is a style of oyster, as well as a spécial de clair. They'll do Bellon oysters, which is the flat. And then you can get into Gillardeau, which is a sort of a higher name brand as well, as far as it's sort of like the Veuve Clicquot of champagne to oysters. So Gillardeau as a house is actually really well known. They will also carry in farms from Portugal and Ireland. So if you go, you can go and get a Portuguese grown French finished oyster called a Josephine. And then Tiamara is their Irish grown French finished oyster as well as the Gillardeau. You can get 3 different countries in one sit down in Montreal.
Wow. This is why you need the oyster sommelier.
This is why we need to do this. David, I'll hook you up, man. We'll get you all. You need the good stuff. You even get the turf from Boston if you want. No,
that sounds like fun. I was just gonna open shucking just basically Malpecs and some Caraquets because I'm old and traditional. But if all that stuff's available, I'm gonna hit all those guys up.
Well, there's time and place too. You can rotate like a beer pub, right? You got 10 taps. 2 of them are going to rotate. The 8 of them are going to be set still, and then you're going to rotate. So you get a rotating oyster plate, right? This one's coming in from this region for this reason. And creating that's your oyster program. That's where you come in with the concept of the oyster sommelier. And this is where we train people to that level to understand where and how and what to get, when. This is tough as well, David. You got to know this. They can't get European product in the States.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah,
oh,
exactly. So we have Canada has a better ability. We can buy from Mexico, New Zealand, United States, Scotland, Wales, England, and Ireland and France. Mm. And soon, probably we could do Holland and Spain if there was demand for it. So we've already got better palette of oysters in a global perspective than most nations globally.
How are Spanish oysters?
Oh man, from Galicia. Fantastic. It's like they have 2 types as well. So they'll have the ocean sides, the Atlantic side, as well as the Mediterranean side. So you'll have Galicia oysters are like the Ballons from France, but also closer towards the Irish style.
Oh, nice.
Big, wild, chunky, oceany, big ocean. Ballons tend to be a little bit more elegant and flat, small, petite, and sort of an elegant salt. These ones are more rugged ocean. And
let me ask you a question while I got you here. Yeah, go ahead. Go Portuguese.
The Josephine oyster. The Josephine oyster. It's a gigas, so it's a Magellana gigas, so it's a Pacific species of oyster, grown, and it's got such volatile water. It rolls and tumbles all the time. Rock solid, deep cup shell, and a firecracker pop salt on it. It's bonkers. So you got to try a Josephine oyster as well.
Nice. Is there any flats on Prince Edward Island?
There is a secret supply, not in PEI, no, but we know where there used to be oysters grown, Blind Bay Flats out of Nova Scotia. This is back in the 90s, 92. We had those ones into Toronto. So there was a growing program, but it fizzled out because it was low demand, too long to grow, harder to grow. There is a couple of secret spots. And one is a land-bound lake called Lockhart Lake. And the Beausoleil boys know about this. And we're trying to see, this is for a number of years. The landowner doesn't want to really do anything with it. But that was an experimental lake where they did grow flats. Because it was landlocked, saltwater lake, the oysters didn't get out, didn't escape or anything. So that's why they practiced with this here. Again, it took too long. There's a second location, and it's in Nova Scotia, Thrump Cap, Malagash. Bay Enterprises. They say they have a wild oyster, and it comes in a mixed box oyster. Bay Enterprise will put up a mixed box. It doesn't like to grade oysters or anything, so you get a box of oysters, which is fine by me because I'm happy to grade them and wash them in my restaurant. Going, sure, this is large, this is small. This, oh my god, it's a flat. Whoop, super rare.
Can you guys just explain a flat for the people who are listening?
Flat is a European species of oyster. Okay. So it's flat because it's got a flatter profile than, say, something like this. Round, in the French, call them the plat or flat plates.
Ballon.
Ballon is actually an appellation. Like Champagne region, Ballon actually comes from the river Ballon. But
Ballon's a flat oyster.
It is a flat European species of oyster, yes. And it's got a different flavor range, which I think is more oceany.
Are they the best? Is this why?
They
like the...
It's different. It's not everyone's cup of tea because of its complexity and flavor and texture. It's one of my favorite oysters because it really speaks of ocean.
Yeah, it's my favorite as well, I'd have to say.
I
love a good Malpec oyster and a good Caracat oyster, but something very special is definitely a flat oyster. Yeah, those Irish oysters that Patrick's talking about, other Irish oysters have the Crassopteria gigas, which is like the oyster that you're familiar with, basically.
Right.
From Europe. And then there's the Irish flat is just, it's, Leslie, if I had to describe it like in simple and dumb, I would say that oyster meets a clam. You know what I'm saying? The meat is firmer. The abductor muscle is a little bit fatter. When they're, it feels like clam meat sometimes, and they pop like clam meat. It's just great.
It's got a crunch and a firmness and toothsomeness in its texture as well. That is gorgeous. I find it comes off with a lot of seaweedy notes and minerality in the finish of it. Dry tannic finishes as well that goes so well with a nice crisp white wine or a pint of Guinness, depending on the region that you're coming from. It really kind of works well in those ideas.
Will you guys go out on a limb and say that Canadian oysters are the best oysters in the world? Or are you not willing to go out on that limb?
Apples and oranges.
Okay.
Are they the best oranges in the world? Canadian, and when we're talking Canadian now, we're also spanning two coasts. So you have Pacific and you have Atlantic. Right. So again, that's going to be an apples and oranges moment, and we do have fantastic. And
okay, I like that. We have fantastic oysters.
We have absolutely fantastic. Our standards are great. Our growing methods are fantastic, and the waters that they come from, both coasts, are pristine and full of nutrients and gorgeous. You can find exquisite oysters from every region. So not just one province, but each region has its own and each province really technically has its own growing region as well. I'm calling New Brunswick has got 3 distinct growing regions. So you'll find a different texture and flavor, even though it's the same province, same species, differences in oysters as you drive along the coastline. Same thing with Pacific, the West Coast oysters. So Canada as a country has world-class, fantastic oysters.
I stand with Patrick. I feel the exact same way. And I never like the word best anyway, right?
Right.
There's fantastic oysters everywhere. Of course, I'll always be partial to, our oysters here in Canada. But I love nothing. There's nothing more I love than tasting, fantastic oysters from other countries. It's a treat, and I get super excited about it, learning more as well.
I would also say back to the beginner is that maybe somebody who maybe start with a PEI oyster more so than, let's say, a French oyster or something.
100%.
Start with something a little gentle, maybe work your way up. No?
I'll always say, though, even in the restaurant business, I'd say that, a Malbec or a Carcat oyster is an eating oyster. All right. I have no problem still to this day to sit down and eat 24, 36 oysters with dinner.
A sessionable oyster.
Yeah. Whereas, I spent time in Paris last year with the Paulbert family at Le Caillard Paulbert. And of course, we had access to all these, terrific oysters from her family farm. And it's not, they're amazing, but I can't put away, 24 flats. I can have 4 to 6 flats and maybe 6 jagas, and I'm good. Like, I want to move on after that to a bit of lobster meat or a little bit of fish meat, right? But
I agree.
Our oyster is, you can have 48 for dinner, no sweat,
Yeah. I feel we only scratched the surface. But great.
Yeah, we should bring Patrick back.
You got to come back, Patrick.
Sure. Absolutely.
Talk some more about this amazing world of oysters.
We could talk all day about oysters, really, in the end.
Yeah. But how great also to have you guys in Canada. I mean, if oysters are popular today, it's because of people like you. So thanks to both of you for
we appreciate that.
Your geekiness and passion and oyster nerds. There you go.
I'll tell you a funny thing, and don't get mad. But one night I was working at the oyster bar at Joe Beef, and John Bill was like basically talking to someone behind me at the oyster bar. So I'm shucking, and I went a little bit too in depth, about some oyster that I was really, happy about. I think I was going off on Johnny Flynn's oysters or something, just trying to oversell it to a customer. And John looks over at me. Of course, we all know John passed away, a few years ago, and and he was a big oyster presence in Canada. John taps me on the shoulder and he goes, "Dave, you don't have to get all Patrick McMurray about it." And I love that line. I was like,
is so
I go, "What does that mean?" I go, "Well,
too much.
Patrick's intense. I love him. He talks a lot about oysters. You don't have to get all Patrick McMurray about it."
I love it.
It's a great line.
That.
Well, thank you for getting all Patrick McMurray with us, Patrick McMurray. I love every minute of it. Great
Thank you so much, Patrick. We look forward to seeing you soon, and we'll talk about getting you up at the restaurant in the new year.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
Be well. Thank you so much.
Ciao.
Rodney introduced us to the literature of oysters. One of them that he liked a lot was The Walrus and the Carpenter by Lewis Carroll. And it goes something like this. It's a bit of a long one. So here we go. The Walrus and the Carpenter by Lewis Carroll. The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might. He did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright. And this was odd because it was the middle of the night. The moon was shining sulkily because she thought the sun had got no business to be there after the day was done. It's very rude of him, she said, to come and spoil the fun. The sea was wet as wet could be, the sands were dry as dry. You could not see a cloud because no cloud was in the sky. No birds were flying overhead. There were no birds to fly. The Walrus and the Carpenter were walking close at hand. They wept like anything to see such quantities of sand. If this were only cleared away, they said, it would be grand. If 7 maids with 7 mops swept it for half a year, do you suppose, the Walrus said, that they could get it clear? I doubt it, said the Carpenter, and shed a bitter tear. O oysters, come and walk with us, the Walrus did beseech. A pleasant walk, a pleasant talk, along the briny beach. We cannot do with more than 4 to give a hand to each. The eldest oyster looked at him, but never a word he said. The eldest oyster winked his eye and shook his heavy head, meaning to say he did not choose to leave the oyster bed. But 4 young oysters hurried up, all eager for a treat. Their coats were brushed, their faces washed, their shoes were clean and neat. And this was odd because, they hadn't any feet. 4 other oysters followed them, and yet another 4. And thick and fast they came at last, and more, and more, and more, all hopping through the frothy waves and scrambling to the shore. The Walrus and the Carpenter walked on a mile or so, and then they rested on a rock conveniently low. And all the little oysters stood and waited in a row. The time has come, the Walrus said, to talk of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot, and whether pigs have wings. But wait, the oysters cried, before we have our chat, for some of us are out of breath, and all of us are fat. No hurry, said the Carpenter, and they thanked him much for that. A loaf of bread, the Walrus said, is what we chiefly need. Pepper and vinegar, besides, are very good indeed. Now, if you're ready, oysters dear, we can begin to feed. But not on us, the oysters cried, turning a little blue. After such kindness, that would be a dismal thing to do. The night is fine, the Walrus said. Do you admire the view? It was also kind of you to come, and you are also very nice. The Carpenter said nothing but, cut us another slice. I wish you were not quite so deaf. I've had to ask you twice. It seems a shame, the Walrus said, to play them such a trick, after we've brought them out so far and made them trot so quick. The Carpenter said nothing but, the butter's spread too thick. I weep for you, the Walrus said. I deeply sympathize. With sobs and tears he sorted out those of the largest size, holding his pocket handkerchief before his streaming eyes. O oysters, said the Carpenter, you've had a pleasant run. Shall we be trotting home again? But the answer came there none. And this was scarcely odd because they'd eaten every one. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Clark. Thank you, Lewis Carroll. But mostly, thank you, Rodney Clark.